Why are they doing this right now? I mean, we know gold has been moving up, silver's been moving up very slowly, but all of a sudden they just, for the last 2 days, just slammed it down. What's the motive behind all of this?
Well, it's continual manipulation. It's continual control since the 1970s via computers and the derivatives. So this is nothing new. They can place the price at zero if they want. There's no such thing as a free market in gold and silver. And the reason is that gold and silvers are the barometer for the health of the unbacked fiat monetary system. And if you look throughout history at the unbacked system, usually when you go off a gold standard and invent something new, as it happens all the time, usually lasts 7 to 10 years. This time, it has lasted since 1971, unprecedented in the history of monetary kind of fluctuations. And the only reason it's lasted so long is the control of the gold and silver market, the control of the oil market, using computers and derivatives, which were introduced into the economic scene in the 60s and 70s. So, yeah, the Fed and the U.S. Treasury have complete control of price, of supply and demand don't really matter on the physical side, because when you're trading against silver, it's over 300 to 1. 300 derivatives are traded for every 1 ounce of silver. The insanity is just, I mean, it's off the charts. And lately, the commercial short position in silver on the COMEX has hit all-time highs. So normally, throughout the last, say, 15, 20 years, when it hit the all-time highs, they would slam it down. The banks, along with the Fed, they all work together. They would slam the price down, shake out all the weak hands, and then start fresh. Will it be done this time? I don't know. There are some signs at both the CFTC and within the Trump administration that are kind of hinting at silver not being necessarily slammed down, but rather controlling the rise up. So they'll let it go up, $5 or $10 in the coming chaos, and then slam it down for $5. So it's more about control of the price than it is about complete rigging and destroying sentiment and stuff like that now.
So why are they controlling it? I mean, what's the purpose of it? I mean, they don't want people to realize that gold and silver, they're actual money?
Well, yeah, that and other countries and the big investors. I mean, gold and silver are the barometers for the health of the fiat system. And when you see gold and silver prices rise, those are the people who have a lot of money and the central bankers around the world and are kind of enemies in Russia. And well, I don't really think there are enemies, but at least on the face of it, in North Korea and Venezuela, it gives them more power to say, hey, look, gold and silver are going crazy. The United States is losing control of the unbacked system. And that's the whole reason. That was always the reason to rig gold and silver with computers and derivatives. And these programs were invented. We've talked about this by Alan Greenspan back in the 1960s. And that's the only reason he was put as head of the Fed. You had the largest gold bug in the world heading the most anti-gold institution, the Federal Reserve Bank, back in 1987. That's what Reagan was doing. That's the reason he put Greenspan there, to continue to rig the markets with his computers. And that's what's being done right now by, Yellen and Steve Mnuchin. Mnuchin is he was the head of IT for Goldman Sachs. He was in charge of all the computer riggers at Goldman Sachs. That tells you something right there about how much computer market rigging is currently going on.
So what signs do you look at with gold and silver where you say, okay, things are breaking apart, they can't control gold and silver, and now it's starting to move up? I mean, what are you looking at?
Well, they still can, because it's unlimited the amount of derivatives you can throw at gold and silver. You said 2 billion they dumped on gold in derivatives. That's nothing. I mean, they can dump 2 quadrillion if they want. They can set the price of gold and silver at zero and shut down the markets if they wanted. Problem with that is their tool for rigging prices and keeping that perception, the false perception, keeping it going, would be gone. So they want to make it look like it's a freely traded market, but not have it run away. So it's been a delicate balance for the last 40 years of computer market rigging.
When do you think the market rigging will come to an end, or will it ever come to an end?
I do think it'll come to an end. It will end when the weapon of mass financial destruction goes off, which is the derivatives market, as Warren Buffett called it so perfectly, a weapon of mass financial destruction. Because you have counterparties with these large banks. Deutsche Bank is already starting to fall again. They were bailed out at the end of the third quarter last year by China, believe it or not. So Deutsche Bank was about to go down. They're the largest bank derivative holder with, I think it's 70 or 80 trillion dollars worth of derivatives. And they were going to go down in September. Their price dropped below $10. It was going to trigger all these, what they call COCO bonds, or collateral convertible bonds. And that would trigger, I think it was at around $9. It went right around $9 and then shot up. And the rumor was that China went in to bail them out, because China doesn't want the system to implode either. China is obviously kicking everybody's ass now. So they don't want the system to implode. So they bailed out Deutsche Bank. There was a lot of talk that it was a large silver derivative that China owned the other half of, that they bailed out Deutsche Bank. But now Deutsche Bank's falling again, and there's still that large, gigantic derivative holder. And the derivatives are necessary to keep the system going. They have to control the pound, the euro, oil markets, the gold markets, the silver markets. Without control of those, you're going to see the implosion fairly rapidly of the unbacked fiat system. And once one of these if Deutsche Bank goes, you can kiss every bank goodbye, every savings and loan, everything, because they're all interconnected. They all have deals with each other. And if you have one defaulting, it's kind of like in 2008, Hank Paulson went to Congress and said, we got 30 minutes or this whole system will implode. We need $700 billion. Now Mnuchin's going to go to Congress and say, I need $20 trillion.
And do you think Congress is going to give him $20 trillion?
They are not allowed, believe it or not. Well, they are allowed, but in the Dodd-Frank law, right before it got signed into law, somebody, they think it was Citibank, threw in a clause that said before you pay out, before the FDIC can pay out, the mom, pa, checking account, savings account, they have to pay out derivatives first. So basically, it's going to be a situation that Steve Mnuchin will go to Congress and say, well, the American public needs $20 trillion, but before we can do that, because of the Dodd-Frank law, we need about $80 quadrillion to bail out the derivative problem. So basically, they assured that Congress would not allow the bailout, and they can't really allow a bailout anyway after what happened last time. If you walk down the street in America today versus 2008, in 2008 nobody knew what was going on. Today we all know that it was a con. The bankers conned us. They got bailed out and they got rich. Now, if you talk to people on the street, they'll say, "No way would I approve a banker bailout." But not approving a bailout means you lose everything. So it's kind of like one of those things that is going to really toss a monkey wrench into the economic markets. But there was always planned to do that. So we'll see what happens.
Now, in one of your videos, you talked about silver, and I know Cliff High was out there saying that silver is going to shoot up, and you're saying that silver is a better investment than gold. Can you just explain why silver is a better investment than gold?
Well, sure. In the history of gold mining, most of the gold is still sitting there in people's vaults. There's about 6 billion ounces of gold that just sits there, and it's a monetary metal. That's its main use, and jewelry also, but mainly, and people keep jewelry in vaults too. So you dig it out of the ground and you store it away in your safe in your vault. So all the gold that's ever been mined is pretty much still available. Silver, on the other hand, it's exactly the opposite in the last 60 or 70 years, that we've started using more and more silver in industrial applications. Every flat screen TV, every cell phone, every solar panel uses silver. So silver is literally used up in the smallest of pieces. Back in 1950, around there, it was estimated there was close to 50 billion ounces of silver available. And now they think maybe 6 billion ounces of silver because it's all been used up. It's not like it disappears though. It's not consumed. It doesn't vanish, but it gets used in such small amounts that you can really never recover most of it. I think if the silver price went to 1,000 or 2,000 bucks an ounce, people would be rummaging through the landfills of the world trying to, scrape out a few ounces of silver. But at $18, no one's going to go track down the silver that's in, the hundredth of an ounce of a silver that's in a cell phone. So that's one of the main reasons that the monetary riggers, the people who try to control the system, have really focused mainly on silver to keep that under control. It's the largest short position of any commodity on the COMEX. It is J.P. Morgan is knee deep in it, and J.P. Morgan's a agent of the U.S. government, is what they argued in a court case on gold manipulation. So yeah, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. The silver story. I did a big expose on them. The U.S. government lent the military 2.75 billion ounces of silver back in the 1940s to create the first atomic bomb. And it was they needed these large magnets, and that they needed a lot of silver. I mean, a lot of silver. So this is all the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. They were building these things called calutrons. And so the U.S. military lent them all this, basically almost all the silver they had, to create enough enriched uranium to create the first atomic bomb. And that silver pretty much stayed where it was in these magnets until the 1990s, when they finally tore down the facility. And that's where all the physical silver has come from. A lot of people said that physical silver would disappear at the end of the 90s, and nobody knows where this huge amount of physical silver has come from. But that's exactly where it came from. It came from the shutting down of the facility at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and then 2.75 billion ounces came into the market. Even the U.S. export data shows pretty clearly of what happened. So, yeah, I think it's running out, though. So get your physical silver now.
I wanted to switch to Bitcoin because there's a lot of people out there that are nervous about Bitcoin. It's something that you can't really hold. I know there's a paper wallet, but it's not like gold and silver where you can hold it physically and say, okay, I have it. Bitcoin is, on the internet. It's a cryptocurrency. People are nervous if the internet goes down, then what happens to it? And I guess, I don't know if people fear it because of the electronic currency that we have right now from the central bank, and the banks control it. And maybe that's why people are nervous about Bitcoin. But you continually say that Bitcoin is going to be the way of the future, and no one controls Bitcoin. The government doesn't control Bitcoin, and everyone should have Bitcoin.
Well said. Well said.
How can you clear it up? I mean, let's say we do have a problem with the internet. Let's say not the whole entire internet, but certain sections of the internet go down and people can't get their funds. That people can't use their funds. Then what do?
The majority of our goods and services are delivered necessarily through the internet. So there would be no food, no water, no power. So most of civilization would end as we know it. So yeah, that when people say, well, what if the internet goes down and your Bitcoin will be worthless? Yeah, but you'll be dead. So it will not matter. Your gold and silver will be just as worthless. But no, I don't see the internet going down. I think technology is with us. There'll be bumps and hiccups, and there's EMPs or solar flares that can take down the internet. But when the internet comes back up, your Bitcoin's exactly where it was. And if you hold your wallet, your paper wallet Bitcoin, or your electronic off-site storage device Bitcoin, you'll have the exact same amount of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will be up and running because everybody who participates in Bitcoin controls Bitcoin. There's no centralized government who controls Bitcoin, and it can't be controlled. So, yeah, it is an amazing invention. I know a lot of people, I've converted a lot of people. And once you spend a few hours, just go onto YouTube and ask questions like, what is Bitcoin? And you'll find hundreds of videos explaining what it is. And it took me a while because I was a big time gold and silver bug. I still am. But I also see the utility of Bitcoin in day-to-day transactions where gold and silver might not be as good. Like right now, I can go to my local Starbucks and buy a coffee with Bitcoin. it's not direct, but it's kind of indirect through other companies right now. But that will change when the electronic debt based monetary system crashes because of the derivative thing we just talked about. The United States and every country around the world will be looking for an alternative to what they had before, and they're not going to count on these bankers to start up again. So China has big plans for every person in China to be dealing with Bitcoin. That's 1.4 billion people, and they're clearing the way for that. The United States is clearing the way for that as well. There are very few laws regulating Bitcoin in the United States and in China, and that's what they want. They want Bitcoin to be ready and available when the system crashes. So I think it'll be a combination of gold, silver, and Bitcoin that will be used. Maybe even some other cryptocurrencies, but mainly Bitcoin because it has a huge infrastructure. Billions have gone into the infrastructure. And once you use it, you get it on your phone and you use it a few times, it's really simple to use. And the theoretical concept of electronic money, nobody seems to have a problem with it today. I mean, pretty much all assets are electronic these days and can go away with a blink of an eye. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. I think it'll gain a lot of momentum when the first banks start failing, the first large banks, and people lose their life savings and their 401k and stuff like that. People will be looking for an alternative, and they're not going to look to the bankers to provide that alternative.
You just explained Bitcoin and with the internet and how you can use Bitcoin to purchase. Are the central banks, are they okay with Bitcoin? Do they hate Bitcoin?
Well, you're talking to a guy who thinks the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston is looking to destroy the monetary system. So there are people within the central banks, yes, that are absolutely getting ready for they know they can't stop it. That's kind of the key. They try to stop it. They're always trying to stop it, but they can't stop it, which is great. But they are looking to embrace the blockchain, which is the technology behind Bitcoin, and they will be using the blockchain, and they will also be adapting Bitcoin. The really interesting time will be when central banks and banks around the world start printing money to buy Bitcoin. And you'll see hyperinflation in certain areas, but hyperinflation definitely in Bitcoin. We're talking millions of dollars per coin at that point because central banks print the money, and the money is the problem. And then Bitcoin has a limited supply. 21 million coins is all that can ever be mined. So it's really the only choice for money that has a limited supply. Gold and silver they have tight supply, and we think we understand the supply of gold and silver. I don't think we do, but you can always find a big silver mine or a gold mine. Bitcoin, on the other hand, has a definite fixed supply, 21 million coins. So I think governments around the world and banks around the world will be printing money to buy Bitcoin.
So my next question is, why do we need the central bank or banks if we're using Bitcoin? Is there any purpose to have a bank or a central bank anymore?
Well, I would, there's a lot of people who would argue that we didn't need them in the first place. The Constitution doesn't give.
I agree with you.
It doesn't give the central bank any power. The power to create money and distribute money is with Congress, and Congress has shirked that power. I believe I know why they did that in 1913. How they convinced Woodrow Wilson to do that has to do, I believe, with this gigantic gold find that they found. Scared the crap out of Woodrow Wilson, who was very much anti-bank. But he knew that if this massive gold find in the Grand Canyon was released to humanity, it would destroy the monetary system, and the world, the society would just be ripped apart. So they have prolonged this game, and Woodrow Wilson allowed the banksters to create the Federal Reserve Bank on December 23rd, when everybody in Congress was pretty much home for Christmas. I think the central banks know exactly what's going to happen. This is not something that will be brand new to them. Anybody who thinks about monetary policy, thinks about money in general, comes to the ultimate conclusion that unbacked fiat money will crash at some point. They've been able to control it with computers and derivatives for much longer than it should have lasted. But now, especially the United States, who has the ultimate control over it, they can crash the system with a click of a mouse now, and that was seen in the WikiLeaks Vault 7 documents, that the CIA has access to every single computer and every computer component in the world. So yeah, it's odd and scary times, but this is a huge transition we're about to go through, and everybody should be aware that something is going to change, something very large, and it's the only thing that hasn't changed really is our monetary system, and that's the thing that's going to change.
Are we going through the transition right now?
Oh yeah, I would say, it depends how you look at it. I mean, from our, the last 20 years, the transition really started in September of 2008, when they had to go to Congress and say, give us $700 billion. And then the banks leveraged it up to 20 trillion, and the Federal Reserve opened their doors to everybody. That was the beginning. So all those problems have not been fixed. They've only been amplified into sovereign debt and other forms, and gotten just gigantic. We're at another housing bubble even. I mean, the insanity of what's going on is amazing, but people don't recognize it because of the computer rigging to keep, like, the stock market safe and sane, and they don't let it drop and they don't let it rise too much, so everybody thinks everything's fine. The stock market's pretty much a barometer of, because people think it's freely traded, and it's not. It's 99% of the trades is a guess, happen between the Fed, the U.S. Treasury, and the bullion banks, the large banks that play the game with the Fed. You can see this in the volumes. Volumes are off the charts, and with stock trading, with bond trading, with COMEX trading, oil, gas, everything. Everything's controlled with computers and derivatives now. So it's a scary time when they click that mouse and say game over.
When Trump came into office, do you think he realized how bad the economy really was? Because I know during his campaign, he said there were bubbles everywhere. Then once he was inaugurated and he was president, he came out and said that the economy is a mess. Do you think as he entered office, do you think he found out how bad things really were?
Well, Trump is working with what I call the good guys. And the good guys are the deep state guys. There's good guys and bad guys in the deep state. And the bad guys have controlled us for a long, long time. Probably since the creation of the Federal Reserve, but definitely since they took out Kennedy in the 60s. But the good guys have taken back control. And I believe that the Trump, when Trump became president, that was a great sign that really was a takeover, a kind of counter coup that you've heard rumors about within the U.S. government. A lot of people saying, "Oh, Trump didn't know what he's got into. Now he's turning to the dark side." No, I think he's doing this all on purpose, because he doesn't want to. We don't want to blame Trump for the problems that were created over the last 50 years. And yes, there's bubbles everywhere. Trump knows it. He knew everything going in. At first, I think the first part of his administration was, okay, I can fix this and have like a smooth transition. I never thought that was possible. So now he's basically pivoting to everything that was done in the past, because he knows the crash is about to take place, and he can order the crash through the Exchange Stabilization Fund and the Working Group on Financial Markets, that he controls those groups and can say, okay, pull the plug, we're done. If he just think about it, if he fixed half of the problems and then the system crashed, that wouldn't be good. He wants the system to crash now. And the best way for him to do that, I think, is to go back to the old ways, show people just how bad the old ways were. The system crashed because we created too much money, because we had all these wars overseas, because healthcare was way too expensive and the Obamacare doesn't work. This is why the system's crashing. A lot is going to be, he's going to try to blame on Obama. He does already, and a lot of it is Obama and Bush and Clinton's fault. And the people they worked with, what I call the bad guys. So yeah, I think the Trump pivot is exactly that. He knows exactly what's going on, and they're preparing for the crash right now.
And like you said, I mean, a lot of people, especially in the alternative media, they're very angry right now.
And they should be. They should be. I mean, they're playing their part. This is not this whole idea of the Trump pivot is a tactical pivot and absolutely planned. That's why he bombed an empty airbase in Syria for the babies. Look at the news media all of a sudden loves Trump and says, "Oh yeah, he's finally turning into the president." It's ridiculous. But at the ultimately, when the system falls down and crashes, a lot of these people are going to go to jail. I heard about a third of Congress will end up in jail for various reasons. So this is a big deal. What's happening right now, and the Trump pivot over the past few weeks is not a turn to the dark side. It is all part of the plan to destroy the system.
So what do you think is happening right now with like North Korea? Because we could see that he bombed the base in Syria, and it looked like the deep state wanted him to bring in 150,000 troops, but he didn't do it.
Well, he bombed an empty airfield
with 59 Tomahawk missiles, and half of them
supposedly, yeah.
Yeah, half of them didn't even make it. And it's funny because I'm not into numbers or numerology or anything, but when you look up the number 59, I don't know if the significance of 59 is out with the old, in with the new.
Oh, cool. Well, it fits right in line with what Trump is doing. You look at the cover of The Economist magazine. I did a full report on that, and the very first card is the Tower card, and the Tower card is all about crashing the old system and bringing in a new system. And the next card in there is the judgment card with Trump sitting on the world, casting not judgment, but using good judgment in the future. So it's really interesting what is, and then you kind of sit back and say, well, if they knew what was coming, are they causing it, or did they have some crystal ball like remote viewing or something like that they saw the future and just kind of alluded to it in the cover of The Economist magazine? I think it could be a little of both. We'll see, though. If the system falls down, I said it would probably happen in the first half of the year because Trump wants to fix the system. But in order to fix the system, he can't fix things and then have the system crash. So if he crashes the system, a creative destruction event, taking down everything, especially the banks, and then kind of trying to start it back up again. That's kind of what he does with his bankruptcies and his companies. That's how he runs his business. He's declaring bankruptcy left and right, and then he rebuilds. It's the perfect guy to have there, rebuilding the United States from scratch.
Do you think that the deep state right now, I mean, let me back up for a second. I mean, since he's done this, and since people are looking at him saying, well, now he's with the deep state, he's with the swamp, and they're just going on and on about that. He's actually taken away all the Russian collusion and all that stuff. And
Yes, exactly.
I mean, the corporate media, all they continually talk about is North Korea, Syria, and war. That's pretty much what they are all just continually reporting now.
Yeah. I think as far as North Korea, I think Trump and China, the good guys within the U.S. and China and Russia are all working together on this. So I don't think, and China has already been told, hey, you guys take care of North Korea, which I think they're going to do, either with Trump or just by themselves. And you notice that there has been another Trump pivot, and now China's a good trading partner and not a currency manipulator. But the whole Russian thing was required because there's still an investigation going on into the Trump people colluding with the Russians, which they were. I mean, you had to have China and Russia and all the big powers collude to take out the bad guys. Absolutely had to do that, and that's exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing overall, and in the end, humanity will be much better off, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be a rough and tumble time to get, from here to there.
Do you know why they're pushing the idea of North Korea having nuclear weapons?
Well, from what I hear, North Korea was created after World War II, when the Japanese soldiers basically left China and went into North Korea and created a North Korea. That's when it was created. Supposedly the Rothschilds and the Bush family were knee deep in that, and there was a lot of banking chicaneries going on out of North Korea, and it was it's kind of like the last stronghold of the bad guys is what I like to think of it. And it might turn out to be some kind of war that goes on, but knowing that the United States has control of all computer electronic components, I'm not too worried about a nuclear bomb being shot off in our direction. They can just shut it down with a click of a mouse.
Do you think that the deep state, the bad guys, as you call them, that they'll go as far as having some type of false flag to get us into war? And at that point, what do you think Trump's reaction would be?
Well, they did. I mean, Syria, the first Syria, the gas attack was clearly a false
Yes.
flag. So Trump, his reaction was really interesting. He did what they wanted him to do. He reacted to the dying babies. The babies was the mantra in the mainstream media, and then he shut the door on that, and they can't bitch about it. So there's also talk that these bad guys are being culled, being removed from position of power within the U.S. government, and there's not many left. I think in Europe there's a lot within the EU, but that will gradually over time. The EU is about to implode, so they'll be taken out when that finally hits there. Europe's in deep trouble because they opened the borders to so many immigrants and refugees. There will be civil wars probably in every country within Europe as the migrants are mad and angry that they're not, being able to live the way they want, and the nationalists are angry that these people came into their country and are trying to change everything. Same thing was going to go on in the U.S., except Trump is trying to put a stop to that. So really interesting times we live in.
As we go through this collapse transition and Trump is trying to restart the system or bring it down and then bring it back up, are we still going to go through the same type of pain? And will he try to make it easier for people, or there's just no way out of it? It's going to be a difficult time.
Well, I think he was trying to make it easier when he first got in. And I didn't think that would ever work. There's a few problems with trying to make it easy. Is you're not going to solve the problem. The problem is unbacked fiat money that you got to get rid of. You can't be the decider. There can't be any deciders on that one. It's up to the derivative market to force it to happen, which could come at any moment. But I think there was no way that this could be a smooth transition, and that's why they put it off for so long, at least since the 60s when Kennedy was assassinated. They know who did it, and they knew all along. But pulling that plug, millions will die in this transition. There's no doubt about it. If you stop the monetary system and it freezes up and everybody loses their checking account, savings account, 401k, that's a big problem. And you're going to have societal unrest, but there's no other way to get that from here to there. The corruption is so deep, and there's so many funds hidden away in the Panama Islands and Antigua and the Bahamas. I would say 95% of all electronic wealth is hidden away now by these bad guys. So you got to take out all the electronic wealth, the debt-based wealth, to ever get anything back to normal. And that's exactly what they're going to do with the crash of the derivative market. It'll take down all the electronic assets. And remember, electronic assets have only been around since the 1970s, really. Before that, it was all paper contracts, and everybody now believes in these electronic blips held by a third party with 10 trustees between you and your real asset. It's getting down to that point where if you don't have it in your hand and possess it, there's no chance you're going to see it in the future.
Vix, for my last two-part question here, when do you think he's going to do this, and how long do you think it will take for him to restart the system?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say him. I don't think anybody will be in charge of restarting the system because he won't be the one deciding. Most likely, the United States can go back to its constitutional forms of money, gold and silver. And that's what the Fed, Boston stuff is saying. As far as when, I would say it started in 2008. It is ongoing. When will the banks freeze up is usually the question I get. What day? Although I had thought it would all happen within a week or two, with Europe going first, there are signs that lots of bailouts will take place. It's like a bank failure every day type of thing, and the media will block that out. So between now and September, I think is your hot spot for this stuff to happen. If it goes past September, I would guess it would be more akin to the nuclear war type of thing, which is not good. It will mean that the good guys are having a problem, still having problems with the bad guys behind the scenes. But this latest pivot by Trump is a good sign because it goes back to the old system, and the old system was the problem, and the old system has to fail for a new system to be instituted. So that's kind of my time frame and what I see happening.
So the other part is, how long do you think it will take to restart everything, to get it back?
Decades, decades. I
Really?
mean, yeah. I mean, but it won't be back to the world will be very different. You can't return to this system. So you can't return to, I think it will be more people taking care of themselves because the government is going to fall apart. And the government controls so much of our lives these days, from healthcare to the law and what are the norms and things like that. Without any media, without any government, it'll get back to individuals taking care of themselves. But I think if it goes smoothly, it'll be a few weeks to a month before we start making strides to get a new society functioning. And then a couple years before it starts going smoothly, and then decades before we can say we're up and running, it's fully functioning, and we're living out our founding fathers' desires for the United States. That's in the United States. Other countries will probably be a lot worse.
Vix, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
Go to roadtoruta.com. If you put your name and email in there, you get a free book called Silver, Gold, Bitcoin, and God. And then always check out my YouTube station, Road to Ruta. I'm trying to translate 17 years of research into YouTube videos. So I put a couple up there a day.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for being on the Spotlight. I appreciate it.